When the CEO of a successful company pulled up to the gates of his own headquarters, he was not expecting to be treated as an outsider, dressed simply and without the obvious displays of wealth that many might associate with a high-ranking executive. He expected the guards to recognize him, or at least treat him with basic courtesy. Instead, what he encountered was suspicion, hostility, and an immediate assumption that he did not belong. The security guards, entrusted with protecting the premises and ensuring safety, acted not from professionalism but from prejudice. They questioned him harshly, blocked his entry, and refused to believe that he was the very man whose name was etched on the building's leadership plaque. This moment of humiliation was not just a personal insult, but a reflection of the larger societal issue of bias that many individuals of color face daily, regardless of status or achievement. As the confrontation unfolded, the CEO attempted to calmly explain who he was. He provided his name, his position, and even showed identification, yet the guards were not moved. Their tone remained dismissive, as though no evidence he presented could outweigh their preconceived assumptions. To them, he was not a leader, not an executive, not a person of authority. He was simply someone who, in their eyes, did not fit the image of who should be driving through those gates. The irony was striking. Here was a man who had worked tirelessly to build and guide a company to success. Yet in the eyes of those who were supposed to safeguard it, he was an intruder. The deeper sting lay not only in the denial of his identity, but in the way it revealed the casual nature of discrimination. The guards did not stop to consider their actions beyond their bias. They did not pause to think that their rigid stance could cost them their jobs. They acted with the kind of confidence that comes from unchecked prejudice, a belief that their judgment of who belongs and who does not was beyond question. For the CEO, this was a harsh reminder that no matter how high one climbs, racial bias does not always disappear. It lingers in unexpected places, waiting to show itself in everyday interactions. He thought about the symbolism of being stopped at the very gate of his own company. Gates are meant to signify security, order, and the threshold between the outside world and a protected space. But for him, the gate became a symbol of exclusion, a barrier reminding him of the divisions that society still enforces. It was not simply about being denied entry. It was about being denied recognition of his rightful place. This moment laid bare a truth that many successful individuals of color often articulate, that achievements do not always shield one from the stereotypes imposed by others. In the midst of the standoff, employees passing by began to notice the commotion. Some recognized him instantly and attempted to intervene, confirming that he was indeed the CEO. But the guards still hesitated, reluctant to admit their mistake. Their pride, combined with their bias, made them double down instead of stepping back. It was only when higher-level staff arrived and demanded his entry that the gates were finally opened. By then, the damage was done. The humiliation had already seeped into the moment, leaving a bitter taste that could not be erased by a late acknowledgement of error. The CEO, however, was not a man who believed in letting such matters pass quietly. He understood that silence only allowed such behaviors to persist, that overlooking the incident would send a message that prejudice at the workplace, even at the gates, was tolerable. He also understood that leadership was not only about guiding strategy and finances, but about shaping the culture and values of a company. What he had experienced that morning could not align with the values he demanded from his organization. A business built on respect, innovation, and inclusivity could not be protected by those who acted out of discrimination. As he walked through the lobby, his mind replayed the scene in vivid detail. Every dismissive word, every skeptical look, every refusal to accept his truth weighed heavily. He thought about the younger employees in his company who might face similar treatment in different ways, those who might not have the authority to stand against it. If this could happen to him, the highest-ranking official in the organization, what about those just starting their careers? What about clients or partners who visited and faced the same suspicion at the gates? Allowing the security team to remain would mean endorsing the possibility of that happening again, and that was unacceptable. He also considered the broader cultural implications. A company's security team is often the first point of contact for visitors, the first impression for clients, partners, and employees. They are, in many ways, the face of the organization before one even steps inside. If that face projects exclusion, prejudice, or hostility, it undermines the very values the company claims to uphold. In that sense, the incident was more than a personal affront. It was a reputational risk, a failure of professionalism that could tarnish the company's image. The CEO recognized that this moment was a test of his own leadership. It would have been easy to accept apologies and move on, but he knew that doing so would make his principles hollow. Leadership demanded accountability, and accountability sometimes required making hard decisions. He had to set an example, not only for the security team, but for everyone in the company. That discrimination in any form would not be tolerated, no matter where it appeared. He wanted to send a message that the incident of a CEO being stopped at his own company's gate and treated with suspicion revealed the deeper reality of how racial bias and profiling continue to thrive even in professional environments that often pride themselves on diversity and inclusion. Despite the veneer of progress, policies, and corporate statements that emphasize equality, Moments like these strip away the polished exterior and expose the persistence of underlying prejudices that shape human behavior in subtle and overt ways. What happened at the gate was not merely about mistaken identity or procedural error. It was a reflection of how entrenched stereotypes influence perception, creating barriers that no title, no degree, and no level of achievement can fully dismantle. It showed that professional settings, as much as any other place in society, are not immune to the pull of bias that categorizes individuals not by who they are, but by how they look. At its core, racial profiling operates through assumptions. In this case, the assumption was that a black man could not possibly be the CEO of a large and successful company. This assumption was not born out of rationality, but out of long-ingrained stereotypes that define who is expected to hold power and authority. Professional spaces often present themselves as meritocratic environments where talent and hard work determine success. But the reality is that human biases still shape decisions, interactions, and judgments. The security guards were not looking at credentials, resumes, or achievements. They were looking at appearance. And appearance, through the lens of bias, dictated their conclusion that this man did not belong. What makes such incidents particularly striking in professional environments is that they expose the gap between a company's values and its practices. Organizations frequently brand themselves around inclusion, diversity, and equal opportunity. Yet the culture on the ground does not always align with those promises. When frontline employees, such as security staff, act in ways that undermine those values, it indicates that training and awareness have not gone deep enough. A policy on paper cannot erase a prejudice in the mind, and without deliberate effort to address those prejudices, moments like this continue to occur. It forces companies to question whether their commitment to inclusivity is genuine transformation or just surface-level branding designed to meet social expectations. For the CEO, the situation underscored the cruel irony that even leadership is not a shield against bias. Professional achievement often provides individuals with power, influence, and respect. Yet those who are marginalized by race or ethnicity find that these achievements do not always translate into protection from discrimination. No matter how high one climbs, the weight of prejudice can still drag them back into moments of indignity. In the corporate world, where titles and positions carry immense symbolic weight, the refusal of security guards to acknowledge the CEO's authority was not just a personal slight, but a broader symbol of how racial stereotypes strip away recognition of legitimacy and success. The impact of such an incident reverberates beyond the individual who experiences it. Employees across the company, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds, see in it a reflection of their own vulnerabilities. If a CEO can be denied entry into his own workplace because of bias, then what protections do lower-level employees have? The incident becomes a mirror that shows how fragile acceptance can be, how conditional belonging is when prejudice dictates the rules. This undermines a sense of safety and belonging that is critical for a healthy workplace culture, leaving employees questioning whether they, too, might one day face similar treatment. At a structural level, the persistence of such profiling highlights how deeply unconscious bias can infiltrate decisions. The guards did not see themselves as acting unjustly. They believed they were doing their job by preventing an unauthorized individual from entering. But their determination of who was unauthorized was guided not by evidence, but by an internalized belief about who does and does not fit the mold of authority. This unconscious bias operates invisibly, influencing judgments and actions in ways that are often unnoticed until a glaring incident brings it into the light. It is precisely because it is unconscious that it is so difficult to eradicate, requiring continuous education, awareness, and accountability. For companies, incidents like this serve as a wake-up call. They reveal the importance of not only having policies, but also embedding inclusivity into every layer of organizational culture, from top leadership to frontline workers. Diversity training, bias awareness programs, and accountability mechanisms must be more than checkbox activities. They must challenge employees to confront their own assumptions and recognize how their perceptions shape their interactions. The company must recognize that its values are judged not by the words of its mission statements, but by the everyday actions of its representatives, including those at the gates. The CEO's experience also illuminated the broader social context in which professional environments operate. Workplaces do not exist in isolation. They reflect the broader society around them, carrying in its prejudices and inequalities. The same stereotypes that shape interactions in public spaces seep into corporate hallways, meetings, and entrances. When a black CEO is denied recognition, it is not only a workplace issue but also a societal one, where success and authority are still imagined through racialized lenses. To address such moments, organizations must situate themselves within this larger societal struggle, recognizing that they are part of the broader fight against systemic bias. The persistence of racial bias in professional spaces also raises questions about the limits of representation. Celebrating diversity at the top, appointing leaders of color, and showcasing inclusive imagery are important steps, but they do not dismantle the deep-seated attitudes that exist at the ground level. Representation can inspire change, but without cultural transformation, it risks being symbolic rather than substantive. The fact that a black CEO could still be profiled at his own gate shows that representation alone is not enough. It must be accompanied by deliberate, ongoing work to shift perceptions and dismantle stereotypes. There is also a psychological dimension to such experiences. For individuals who encounter racial profiling, even after reaching positions of influence, the message is clear. When the CEO decided to fire the entire security team after being treated with hostility at his own company's gate, it was not an impulsive decision but a calculated move to send a powerful message against prejudice. Leadership often demands difficult choices, and in this moment, he recognized that inaction would signal tolerance of behavior that directly contradicted the values he expected from his organization. The guards were not simply rude or mistaken, they acted with a mindset that revealed entrenched bias. And allowing them to remain in their roles would mean legitimizing that bias. By terminating the entire team, he made it clear that discrimination would not be brushed aside as a minor misunderstanding but would be met with immediate and decisive consequences. For the CEO, this was about more than personal dignity. It was about principle. He understood that as the leader of the company, his actions set a precedent for everyone else. If he accepted apologies and moved forward without consequence, he would be teaching the organization that prejudice could be excused, that professionalism could be compromised by bias without repercussions. Instead, he chose accountability. In firing the security team, he reminded everyone that a company's culture is defined not only by words on a mission statement, but by the standards that are enforced in real situations. His decision was both a disciplinary action and a symbolic gesture, a declaration that the company he led would not tolerate prejudice in any form. The act also reinforced the idea that those who hold positions of authority within a business must embody its values at all times. Security staff, while often overlooked in corporate hierarchies, represent the front line of an organization. They are the first point of contact for visitors, clients, and employees. Their behavior reflects the tone of the company before anyone even steps through the door. By firing them, the CEO was acknowledging the importance of these roles and demanding that they be filled by individuals who upheld the values of respect, fairness, and professionalism. In doing so, he was not simply removing individuals but making a broader statement about the standards expected of all who represent the company in any capacity. The decision also carried weight because it challenged a long-standing pattern of excusing bias as a misunderstanding or an accident. Too often, discriminatory actions are minimized with explanations that they were unintentional, or that the individuals involved did not know better. But the CEO recognized that ignorance does not absolve responsibility. Whether or not the guards consciously acted out of racism, the impact of their behavior was the same. It humiliated a person who deserved respect, and it undermined the values of the organization. By firing them, he rejected the tendency to excuse prejudice as unintentional and instead emphasized that outcomes matter more than intentions. This was an important lesson for the entire company. Professionalism requires awareness, and lack of awareness is no excuse. The CEO's action also highlighted the role of power in confronting discrimination. Many employees who face bias in professional settings do not have the authority to address it so directly. They may be forced to accept mistreatment, to endure prejudice silently, because they lack the influence to hold others accountable. But the CEO had the authority, and he chose to use it in a way that would protect others who might face similar treatment in the future. His decision was not only about what happened to him, but about preventing it from happening to anyone else within the organization. By firing the security team, he used his position of power to shield those with less power, demonstrating a form of leadership that was both protective and principled. The move also carried an undeniable element of symbolism. In many ways, the gate represented a barrier, not just a physical one, but a symbolic one between belonging and exclusion, between acceptance and rejection. By firing the guards who denied him entry, the CEO was tearing down that barrier, reclaiming the space that had been denied to him, and ensuring that no one else would face such a gatekeeper of prejudice again. This symbolism was not lost on the employees and observers of the incident. It was a statement that the gates of the company would be open to all who belonged, not closed off by bias and stereotypes. Critics might have argued that firing an entire team was too harsh, that the CEO could have chosen to discipline them, train them, or replace only a few individuals. But from his perspective, partial measures would not have carried the same weight. The incident was not an isolated misjudgment by one individual, but a collective failure of a team that acted together in enforcing prejudice. If one guard had stepped forward to recognize him, to de-escalate the situation, or to advocate for fairness, the outcome might have been different. But the team as a whole failed, and as a whole, they had to face the consequences. This collective accountability reinforced the idea that tolerance for prejudice within the company would be zero. The firing also served as a lesson in how leadership decisions ripple beyond the immediate moment. Employees across the company observed his response, and it shaped their understanding of what kind of culture they were a part of. It reassured those who had experienced bias that their concerns would be taken seriously, and it warned those who might harbor prejudice that such behavior would not be excused. Clients, partners, and the public also took note, seeing in the CEO's actions a reflection of his integrity and commitment to the message extended beyond the walls of the company, becoming a broader statement about what kind of organization he intended to lead. There is also a personal dimension to the decision. For the CEO, the humiliation at the gate was not just a professional issue but a deeply personal one. It reminded him of the countless times in his life when he had been judged not by his achievements or character, but by the color of his skin. To let such an incident slide in the company he had worked to build would have been a betrayal of his own journey, a denial of the struggles he had faced to reach his position. By firing the team, he was not only defending the values of his company but also affirming his own worth. Refusing to let prejudice diminish him, even in a place where he held the highest authority, the impact of his decision stretched into the future. The new security team that replaced the old one would be trained differently, with a focus on respect, inclusivity, and professionalism. Policies would be reviewed, biases would be addressed, and systems would be put in place to ensure that such an incident could not repeat itself. The firing was not just an ending but also a beginning, a turning point that reshaped the company's approach to gatekeeping and representation.